They taped the notice on my front gate at midnight. A bold red stamp screamed, 72 hours to sell or face legal action. For a moment, I thought it was some sick prank. But as the morning sun rose over my ranch, I saw it clearly. The HOA, those smug tyrants in pressed suits and fake smiles, had finally gone too far. My land wasn't just dirt and fences, it was my bloodline, my late father's dream, the only place that felt like home. And now, with one slip of paper, they were telling me to erase it all in 3 days. My hands trembled as I ripped it down, but inside me, a fire ignited that even they couldn't put out. I knew this wasn't just about regulations. They wanted me gone. They'd been circling like vultures for months, inventing fines out of thin air. $200 for unapproved paint on a barn door, $500 for livestock noise after dark. But this was different. This was personal. Someone in that HOA board had a plan, and I was standing in the way. As I stared at the paper, I swore under my breath. They think they can crush me in 72 hours, but I'll flip this game so hard they won't see it coming. The first rehook came the moment I marched into the emergency HOA meeting. The smug president, Mr. Callahan, leaned back in his leather chair, smirking as if I'd already surrendered. "Mr. Rivers," he said, dragging out my name like it was dirt on his shoe, "rules are rules. You've had multiple warnings. The board voted unanimously. 3 days. Sell the property, or we'll fine you into foreclosure." His words cut like knives, but I didn't flinch. I leaned forward, eyes locked on his, and whispered, "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." Because what they didn't know was that my ranch sat on land that connected 3 rental properties I owned. The HOA, in their blind greed, had overlooked one small clause in the bylaws. If an owner controlled more than 20% of rentable units in the neighborhood, that owner had the power to set the rent caps. They thought I was some dumb rancher too stubborn to read the fine print. But I'd spent sleepless nights combing through every dusty line of their own rule book, and buried in Section 12, subsection 4, was my golden weapon. So, while Callahan smirked, I quietly filed the paperwork. By the time the ink dried, I had triggered my right to raise rents across the board. Not just by a little. I tripled them overnight. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because this story wasn't about rent. It was about war. And war requires strategy. The next twist came when Callahan tried to fight back. He called me late at night, his voice low and dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Rivers. We'll take you to court. We'll bury you." I let him rant, then cut him off. "Funny you should mention court, because I've already filed an injunction against your 72-hour notice. It violates 3 state housing laws, and Ivy got a judge who is very interested in why an HOA is abusing its power like a cartel." The silence on the line told me everything. For the first time, Callahan realized he wasn't dealing with a victim. He was dealing with a man with nothing left to lose. Still, the suspense built. Days passed. Tenants panicked. Rumors spread. Some swore the HOA was collapsing. Others whispered that Callahan had ties to developers who wanted to bulldoze my ranch for luxury condos. And then came the rehook. An anonymous envelope slid under my door. Inside was a photograph of my ranch, circled in red ink with the words, "You don't belong here." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about money anymore. Someone wanted me scared, broken. But all it did was steel my resolve. I started digging. Late nights, dusty archives, phone calls to old county clerks. And then I found it. The developer's plan. A $40 million project to turn my land into a gated resort community. Callahan and his board were promised fat payouts if they pushed me out. That 72-hour notice wasn't about rules. It was a ticking clock for their payday. Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. They weren't just enemies. They were traitors selling out their neighbors for greed. The next chapter of the war unfolded like a chess match. I leaked the developer's documents anonymously to the town's local paper. Within days, headlines screamed, HOA scandal, board accused of corruption and backroom deals. Neighbors who once glared at me in grocery stores now showed up at my ranch, apologizing, offering support. The board was fractured. Half of them fled, resigning under pressure. Callahan stayed, of course, his pride chaining him to the sinking ship, but even he couldn't stop the tidal wave. Just when I thought I'd won, another twist hit. A fire broke out in one of my rental units. The investigators called it suspicious. And I knew in my gut it was sabotage. Someone was sending me a message. Back off, or more would burn. Fear clawed at me for the first time. But then I remembered my father's words. Son, when a storm comes, you don't run. You build a stronger fence. So I doubled my security, installed cameras, and waited. The rehook came a week later when the cameras caught Callahan himself sneaking around the property at night. Caught red-handed, he tried to plead innocence. But when I showed the footage to the sheriff, the man's fate was sealed. Arson, conspiracy, harassment, the charges stacked higher than his ego ever could. And here's where the final twist unfolded. At the trial, as Callahan squirmed in the witness box, his own lawyer turned on him. Why? Because the developer, desperate to save their project, had cut a deal to throw him under the bus. Callahan wasn't just abandoned, he was devoured by the very wolves he tried to serve. The HOA crumbled, the developer backed out. My ranch stood untouched, stronger than ever, and those rents I tripled. I slashed them back down to fair rates, earning the loyalty of every tenant in the neighborhood. The same people who once saw me as a stubborn rancher now called me the man who saved their homes. When it was over, I walked back to the spot where that first notice had been nailed to my gate. The wood still bore the marks of the tack. I stood there for a long time, the wind whipping across the fields, and I smiled. They gave me 72 hours to sell. Instead, I gave them a lifetime of regret. But here's the real kicker, the last hook for anyone listening. As I turned to leave, I spotted a fresh envelope on the ground. No address, no stamp. Inside, a single piece of paper with one line scrawled in black ink. This isn't over.